Imagine this. You're taking a midnight stroll in a foreign city.
And we're talking about a very different kind of midnight here.
Right. The year is 1612. That means there are no streetlights, no ambient glow from distant traffic. I mean, it is just pitch black.
Utter darkness.
Yeah. So you're walking under these heavy stone porticos, relying entirely on memory and like the faint feeling of cobblestones beneath your boots just to guide you.
Which is nerve-wracking enough on its own.
Exactly. And then you step into the absolute darkness of a doorway to let a group of rowdy night watchmen pass. As you stand there, literally holding your breath, a voice whispers from the shadows of a half-open door right beside you.
A completely random door.
Right, and the voice just whispers, "Are you by chance Fabio?"
And of course, you have no idea who Fabio is.
No clue. But you're confused, you're disoriented, so you just mumble, "Yes." Instantly, this bundle is shoved into your arms.
Out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere. It's surprisingly heavy, wrapped in thick fabric, and you actually have to drop your hands to your waist just to catch it. And before you can even process the weight, the heavy wooden door slams shut.
You just hear that heavy iron lock click.
Boom. You're standing alone in the pitch dark. And then, this is the wild part, the bundle in your arms starts to wriggle.
Oh, wow.
A tiny, unmistakable cry breaks the silence. It's a newborn baby.
Which is just an unbelievable
It
situation.
really is. I mean, what do you even do? Because that is the exact terrifying question facing a 26-year-old student named Don Juan in a dark alley in Bologna.
It's quite the inciting incident.
It sets the whole thing off. Today, you and I are plunging into a collection of transcripts, summaries, and full dramatic readings of this classic Spanish text. We are doing a deep dive into La Señora Cornelia.
Yes, a fantastic novella.
Written by the legendary Miguel de Cervantes, published back in 1612 by the printing press of Juan de la Cuesta.
And it's such a fascinating piece of literature because, on its surface, it reads like this frantic thriller.
Oh, totally. Mistaken identities,
Secret babies.
street brawls, all of it. But beneath that swashbuckling exterior, Cervantes is really conducting this surgical examination of 17th century European society.
He's digging deep.
He is. He's stress testing the moral compasses of his characters against the suffocating nature of social honor and the terrifying fragility of a family's reputation.
Right, because reputation was everything.
Everything. He's showing us the profound consequences of just acting decently in a world that's largely governed by violence.
Well, I really want to dig into that society because, a baby handed to a stranger in an alley in 1612 carries a vastly different kind of danger than it would today.
Oh, absolutely. The stakes are completely different.
So to understand why, we need to understand the men who end up holding this child. The sources introduce us to two young men from Spain. There's Don Antonio de Sunza, who is 24, and Don Juan de Gamboa, who is 26.
And the text is incredibly meticulous in establishing their pedigree right from the start.
Right, they aren't just random guys. No, they are wealthy, well-bred, described as gentlemen of excellent lineage. And they actually begin their journey as students at the University of Salamanca in Spain.
Which was a big deal, right?
A massive deal. Salamanca at the turn of the 17th century was not just any school. It was literally one of the intellectual capitals of the world.
Wow.
Yeah, it's where the elite of the Spanish Empire sent their sons to study law, theology, philosophy. It was this crucible of future power.
But, and this is what's so funny, they decide to abandon all of it.
They just walk away.
Yeah, the sources say they're driven by the boiling of young blood. I love that phrasing. So they ditch this incredibly privileged education, pack their bags, and decide they need to seek military glory in Flanders.
Which makes sense if you understand the era.
Well, that's what I'm trying to picture. Like, what is the mindset of a 20-something nobleman here? Why throw away a guaranteed path to power in Spain just to go sleep in the mud in Northern Europe?
Right. It sounds crazy to us. But in the Spanish aristocratic mindset of that time, the exercise of arms was the ultimate undeniable proof of your nobility.
Ah, so it was about proving yourself.
Exactly. Remember, Spain was an empire built on conquest. And at this time, the 80 Years' War was raging in the Low Countries, so what we now call the Netherlands and Belgium.
So Flanders was basically the epicenter of global conflict.
Yes. For a young Spanish nobleman, the university was prestigious, sure, but the battlefield was where your name was forged into history.
They wanted to be legends.
They were chasing this deeply romanticized ideal of the Spanish soldier, the fearsome tercio infantryman. They were expecting grand sieges and heroic charges.
Right. But that romantic ideal hits a massive brick wall of reality pretty fast.
It really does.
They arrive in Antwerp, ready for battle, and realize the fighting has essentially just stopped.
Yeah, the timing here is crucial. The text aligns perfectly with the historical reality of the 12 Years' Truce of 1609.
Okay, so what was that truce exactly?
Well, Spain and the Dutch Republic had essentially fought themselves into mutual bankruptcy. Just total exhaustion on both sides.
Oh, wow. So they just had to stop.
Pretty much. So when our young heroes arrive, they don't find a glorious battlefield. They find diplomats negotiating treaties. They find bored soldiers sitting in taverns.
Just a grinding, bureaucratic stalemate.
Exactly. Not exactly the stuff of epic poetry.
No, not at all. And to make matters worse, the mail arrives from Spain.
Oh, the letters from home.
Yeah, they receive letters from their parents, and these letters are furious. I mean, their families are livid that they abandoned their studies and vanished without a word.
They're essentially cut off socially, scolded like children.
Right. So this is a profound moment of failure for them. I mean, they chased this phantom of military glory and just ended up looking foolish.
But this failure is what forces a pivot that really defines the rest of the story.
Because they don't go back home.
Yeah. No. Instead of returning to Spain in disgrace, they travel south. They take a grand tour of Italy and eventually settle down in Bologna because they're captivated by its famous university.
And I have to imagine their parents breathed a massive sigh of relief when that happened. Because the sources actually note that once they resume their studies, their families begin funding them magnificently again.
The money starts flowing back in.
Exactly. But I want to focus on how Cervantes characterizes them once they are in Bologna. Because the text explicitly states that they are highly respected, generous, polite, and this is the exact phrasing here. They completely lack the arrogance that Spaniards are said to typically have.
Which is a very specific thing for Cervantes to write.
Yeah. Why is a Spanish author writing for a Spanish audience going out of his way to point out that his heroes are exceptional, specifically because they don't act like typical Spaniards?
It's fascinating, right? Cervantes is deliberately confronting the Black Legend of Spain here.
The Black Legend.
Yes, and he's challenging his own readers with it. In the early 1600s, Spain was the dominant imperial power in the Italian peninsula. They controlled Naples, Sicily, Milan.
So they were basically the occupying force.
Exactly. And the local Italian populations often deeply resented the Spanish presence. So the prevailing stereotype across Italy, and honestly much of Europe, was the haughty, aggressive, relentlessly arrogant Spanish nobleman who just viewed everyone else as conquered subjects.
Basically a cultural bully with a sword.
Precisely that. So by making his protagonists musicians and poets, I mean, these are young men who are brave, sure, but they are deeply respectful, deferential, and polite.
He's flipping the script.
He is subverting the national expectation entirely. He is essentially arguing that true Spanish nobility shouldn't be rooted in the arrogant domination of others. It should be rooted in diplomacy, cultural appreciation, and moral character.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
He really strips them of that traditional mythological hero status. And the sources actually point out that this specific story serves as a critique of a very popular literary genre of the time, right? The Byzantine novel.
Oh, definitely. The Byzantine novel was basically the blockbuster action movie of the 16th and 17th centuries.
Really? How so?
Well, these were massive, sprawling epics, characterized by fantastical wanderings. You know, lovers would be separated by shipwrecks, they'd be captured by pirates, sold into slavery in distant lands.
Oh, wow. Just nonstop drama.
Non-stop, and they'd eventually be reunited through these absurd miracles after fighting sea monsters or something.
Okay, so Cervantes looks at that and just does the exact opposite.
Yes, he takes that entire grand, fantastical structure and shrinks it down to, like, a few blocks in a college town.
Right. Don Juan and Don Antonio aren't fighting pirates. They're going to class.
They have pages serving them, they worry about their outfits, and they get distracted by local gossip.
The mundane reality of college life. And specifically, they hear rumors about a woman named Cornelia Bentivoglio.
Right, the namesake of the story. She is rumored to be the most beautiful woman in Bologna. But she is an orphan, and she's kept under literal lock and key by her strict brother, Lorenzo.
So she's basically inaccessible.
Completely. The students trying to catch a glimpse of her, maybe at church, but she is so closely guarded they never even succeed, so they simply give up and go back to studying.
Which is such a grounded, realistic reaction. But I'm actually struggling with a bit of a contradiction in the text here.
Oh, what's that?
Well, the sources describe them as these perfect, studious, polite gentlemen who are universally well-liked. Yet it also explicitly states that on the rare occasions they go out at night, they always go together and they go well armed.
Yes.
And later, when Juan goes out alone, he makes sure to strap on a sword and a buckler, which is like a small metal shield. So is there a disconnect here? How does someone maintain the reputation of a polite scholar while walking the streets at night equipped like a gladiator?
I can see why that feels contradictory. To a modern sensibility, carrying lethal weaponry implies a desire to use it, or at least an aggressive posture.
Right, it feels hostile.
But in the context of a 17th century Italian city, there was absolutely no contradiction at all.
Right.
None. You have to understand, the concept of municipal policing as we know it simply did not exist.
So there were no cops to call.
Exactly. There were night watches, sure, but they were often corrupt, slow, or just totally unwilling to intervene in violent disputes, especially between well-armed nobles.
So the streets were just dangerous.
The streets after dark were genuinely perilous. They were filled with thieves, rival factions, mercenaries.
Okay, so the sword isn't a provocation, it's just a necessity.
It is a marker of your social class and a basic safety precaution. A gentleman without a sword was considered improperly dressed, frankly, and dangerously vulnerable.
Like walking around a bad neighborhood with your wallet taped to your shirt?
Exactly. Wearing the sword communicated that you had the legal right to bear arms and the training to defend your physical person and your honor. It was the 17th century equivalent of, locking your doors and setting an alarm system.
Wow. Okay, so that ever-present threat of violence really perfectly sets the stage for the night their lives change forever.
It's the catalyst for everything.
Let's look at the logistics of this night. It is 11 p.m. Don Antonio decides to stay in the apartment to pray, and he tells Don Juan to take his evening walk without him.
So Juan heads out, walking his usual route through the city.
Just a normal night.
Right. He wanders through a few streets, finds himself completely alone, and decides, the air is too thick and the night is too dark, so he turns back toward home.
And he passes through a street lined with those heavy marble porticos. I mean, the architecture of Bologna is famous for these covered walkways.
They're beautiful during the day.
But they provide shelter from the rain, which is great. But they also create these tunnels of absolute suffocating darkness at night.
Which is where we return to that terrifying opening moment.
Yes, from a half-open door, that whisper, "Are you Fabio?"
He says yes. The baby is shoved into his arms, and the door is locked.
So put yourself in Juan's mindset in the 5 seconds after that lock clicks.
It's unimaginable. The text notes, he is just suspended in utter disbelief.
I mean, I'd probably just knock on the door and give the baby back.
Well, that might be his first instinct too. But he quickly realizes that knocking would create noise.
Oh, true.
And if the person who handed him the baby is hiding, or if there are enemies inside that house, drawing attention could result in the death of the person who gave him the child. Or even the death of the child itself.
Man. So he can't just leave a newborn on the cold cobblestones either. His moral framework forces him into action.
He has to take responsibility.
So he carries the baby back to his apartment, hands it to his maid, and gives her a highly specific set of instructions.
Yes, and this is a brilliant detail.
He doesn't just tell her to keep the baby warm. He tells her to immediately remove the rich aristocratic blankets the baby is swaddled in, swap them for poor humble rags, and then smuggle the baby to a wet nurse.
This specific instruction about the blankets really reveals Juan's exceptional situational awareness.
He's thinking 10 steps ahead.
He hasn't just survived the shock, he is actively managing a crisis. Because in the 17th century, clothing and fabric were highly regulated class signifiers.
Right, there were actual laws about what you could wear based on your class, weren't there?
Sumptuary laws, yes. A baby wrapped in heavy silks, velvet, or gold embroidery was an unmistakable beacon of immense wealth and high nobility.
So if the wet nurse sees those blankets, she knows she is holding an illegitimate royal child.
And the blackmail and gossip from that would destroy a noble house by sunrise.
So by ordering the maid to swap the blankets for rags, Juan is actively protecting the child's identity and the mother's reputation. And he doesn't even have the slightest clue who they are.
He is acting as a political shield for a complete stranger. It's remarkable.
It's fascinating because he has effectively completed the rescue at this point. The baby is safe, the identity is concealed, he could just lock his door and go to sleep.
But he doesn't.
No. He straps his sword back on, picks up his shield, and walks back out into the pitch-black streets, specifically heading toward the door where the baby was given to him.
Which seems insane.
I find it almost maddening. He has absolutely no stake in this fight. Why does he go back into the dark?
Because this is the chivalric impulse in its purest form. Juan recognizes that the handover of the baby was an act of absolute desperation.
A last resort.
Right. A mother does not thrust her newborn into a dark alley unless the alternative inside the house is certain death.
Wow.
So Juan goes back because his personal code dictates that whoever is behind that door likely needs his sword more than the baby did.
But he never even reaches the door. As he approaches the street, the silence is just shattered by the clash of steel.
He sees sparks flying from the cobblestones ahead.
And as his eyes adjust to the darkness, he sees this horrifying imbalance. It's 6 men aggressively attacking one single man.
A completely unfair fight.
The lone man is backing up, parrying wildly and shouting, I love this line, "Traitors, you are many and I am alone, but your treachery won't save you."
6 against 1 in a dark alley is an execution. It's not a duel.
And Juan does not hesitate. He draws his sword, raises his buckler, and just charges into the fray.
And notice the brilliant tactical decision Cervantes writes into this moment.
Yes. As Juan charges, he shouts at the lone man in fleeing Italian, "Don't fear, help has arrived."
Now, why Italian? He's a Spaniard. In a chaotic life-or-death moment, wouldn't you naturally revert to your native tongue?
You would think so. So why does he do it?
It is a calculated move to mask his identity. If he shouts in Spanish, the attackers immediately know a foreign nobleman has involved himself.
Oh, okay.
And that could escalate a local vendetta into a full-blown international diplomatic incident.
Because of the whole Spanish occupation thing we talked about.
Exactly. It could make Juan a specific target for reprisal by local factions who resent Spanish interference. By shouting in Italian, he blends into the local chaos.
He is fighting like a demon, but thinking like a diplomat.
Perfectly said.
He unleashes this barrage of cuts and thrusts, forcing the 6 attackers to shift their focus. And the text emphasizes the brutal reality of this combat. Juan is fighting well, but the lone man is the one taking the massive hits.
Yeah, Cervantes makes it very clear that the lone man only survives this onslaught because he is wearing a peto de diamante.
A chestplate of diamond-hard steel beneath his clothes.
Right, and that peto de diamante was a specific type of concealed armor. It was incredibly expensive and exceptionally resilient.
So it's like a 17th century bulletproof vest.
Essentially, yes. And it tells Juan instantly that the man he is defending is not just an ordinary citizen. He's someone of immense wealth who actually anticipated an assassination attempt.
Right, you don't wear that to go buy bread.
Exactly. 2 heavy thrusts from the attackers hit the man square in the chest strikes that would have instantly killed anyone in regular clothing. But the hidden armor holds.
Incredible. And eventually, the noise of the spiel and the shouting finally wakes the neighborhood.
Shutters bang open, lanterns are thrust out of windows.
People start screaming for the city authorities. So the 6 attackers realize they've lost the element of surprise, and they scatter into the dark.
Which leaves this incredibly tense, immediate aftermath in the dark street.
Right. The man whose life Juan just saved is panting, leaning on his sword. And he asks Juan for his name. He desperately wants to reward this stranger who just pulled him from the jaws of death.
But Juan, maintaining this stoic, gentlemanly facade, just waves off any idea of a reward.
He simply says he is a Spanish student named Don Juan de Gamboa.
The stranger processes this and replies that he won't reveal his own identity just yet. But he promises Juan will find out later.
Classic dramatic irony set up right there.
Oh, completely. And before they can converse any further, a group of the stranger's friends arrive, having heard all the commotion.
And that's when the stranger realizes his hat was knocked off during the violence.
Yes. And Juan also lost his hat while dodging blades in the dark.
So Juan bends down, feels around the cobblestones, grabs a hat, and hands it to the stranger.
The stranger puts it on, pauses, and says, "Wait, this isn't my hat."
Because it is Juan's hat.
Which means the heavy hat still resting on the ground belongs to the stranger.
Right. So the stranger tells Juan, keep it as a trophy of this fight.
And Juan, who is hearing the approaching footsteps of the local authorities,
he definitely wants to avoid spending the night in a 17th century jail cell explaining a street brawl.
Naturally. So he picks up the stranger's hat, bids the man farewell, and slips back into the shadows to head home.
And the irony here is just rich. Juan believes he has successfully concluded the night's business.
He thinks he's done.
Yeah, he secured the baby, he disrupted an assassination, and he's walking away clean. He has no idea that while he was playing the hero in the streets, his roommate Antonio was having an equally chaotic encounter.
An encounter that is about to drag them both into a total political nightmare.
Let's shift perspectives back to the apartment. Antonio had finished his prayers and realized Juan had been gone far too long.
So he's worried.
He's worried. He grabs his own weapons and steps out to find his friend. But he doesn't get very far. A figure wrapped in a long, dark cloak is hurrying toward him, keeping close to the walls.
It's a woman.
Sobbing uncontrollably and just gasping for air.
She stops him and desperately asks if he is a foreigner or a local.
And when Antonio identifies himself as the Spaniard, her reaction is incredibly telling.
She immediately begs for sanctuary. She states that the courtesy of his nation is her only hope.
Which is wild. She claims she has a sickness unto death and will perish if he doesn't hide her immediately.
Now, her reliance on his nationality connects directly back to what we discussed earlier.
The Black Legend stuff.
Well, kind of the inverse here. The local Italian politics, the vendettas, and the factions are clearly what she is running from. A Spanish foreigner is an outsider, totally unbound by the local power structures.
He's a blank slate of safety.
Exactly. And Antonio doesn't interrogate her. He doesn't ask for her name or her family allegiance. He just grabs her hand, pulls her through the back alleys to avoid the main streets, and sneaks her into their apartment.
Right past their own servants, too.
Yes. Once inside his bedroom, she collapses onto his bed, physically destroyed by terror.
And Antonio brings a candle closer to give her some water, and he pulls back the heavy veil of her cloak. The text describes his absolute stunned silence here.
He is looking at an 18-year-old girl whose beauty is so profound it paralyzes him.
But she refuses to explain who she is. She begs him to lock the bedroom door to ensure no one sees her, and she pleads with him to go back out into the street to see if a massive fight has broken out.
Which is a huge clue for the reader. Antonio is overwhelmed, but he agrees. He turns to leave the room, locking her safely inside.
And that is exactly when Juan finally walks through the front door of the apartment.
The collision of these two narratives is just masterful.
It really is like a movie script. The roommates meet in the central room of the apartment. Both are exhausted, covered in the dust of the streets.
Juan starts explaining that he was handed a random baby and then fought off 6 assassins.
And Antonio starts explaining that he found a terrified, insanely beautiful girl sobbing in the street, and she is currently locked in his bedroom.
They are processing the sheer absurdity of the night when the true catalyst for disaster is revealed.
The pages bring in better light so they can examine the trophy Juan brought back from the street fight, the hat.
And when the light hits that hat, the entire room lights up.
Because the hat band is encrusted with diamonds. And they aren't just small chips.
No, they are massive, flawless stones.
The students, who come from wealth themselves and know the value of luxury goods, examine the band and estimate the value at over 12,000 ducats.
We really need to contextualize that number, because 12,000 ducats is almost an abstraction of wealth.
How much is that in practical terms back then?
Well, in 1612, a highly skilled artisan or a successful merchant might earn, say, 50 to 100 ducats in an entire year.
Wow.
12,000 ducats is the economic output of a small town.
That's insane.
It is generational wealth, the kind of money that builds cathedrals or funds small armies.
So this is not the hat of a rich merchant.
Not at all. This is the hat of a sovereign ruler.
And the blinding light reflecting off those diamonds acts as a beacon. The door to Antonio's room is slightly ajar.
The terrified girl inside looks out through the crack, sees the flashing diamonds in Juan's hands, and lets out a gasp that changes everything.
She cries out, "Enter, Lord Duke. Why are you depriving me of your sight?"
She sees the diamonds and assumes the man holding the hat must be the Duke of Ferrara.
Right, so Antonia gently pushes the door open and has to break the news. Ma'am, there is no Duke here.
And then Juan steps into the doorway, holding the glittering hat.
The girl takes one look at a stranger, holding the Duke's most recognizable piece of jewelry, and her mind jumps to the most logical, terrifying conclusion.
She screams.
She thinks the Duke has been murdered in the street, and these Spanish men have looted his corpse.
Which is a completely reasonable assumption given the circumstance.
Totally. But Juan instantly realizes her terror and drops to one knee. He quickly explains the fight in the alley. He swears on his honor as a nobleman that the man who wore that hat is alive, uninjured, and safe.
Saved by the Pero de Diamante and Juan's own blade.
And the relief just washes over her like a physical wave. The sheer exhaustion and the sudden confirmation that the man she loves is alive finally break her silence.
She decides she has to trust them.
She reveals her name, and the pieces of the puzzle violently snap together. She is Cornelia Bentivoglio.
The very same woman the students had been trying to catch a glimpse of for months.
The woman locked away by her brother Lorenzo.
Yes. And Cornelia begins to tell a backstory that explains the baby, the assassins, and the diamonds.
She explains that despite her brother's suffocating surveillance, she fell deeply in love with Alfonso d'Este, the Duke of Ferrara.
And this wasn't just a casual dalliance. Through the careful orchestration of a trusted maid, they maintained a secret, passionate relationship for 2 years.
But the secrecy was paramount.
Absolutely. Her brother Lorenzo was her legal guardian, and he was a man obsessed with the purity of his family's lineage and the absolute preservation of their honor.
And that secrecy shatters when Cornelia gets pregnant.
Yes. As her term nears its end, they hatch a desperate plan to elope.
The Duke is supposed to come to her house this very night, under the cover of darkness, spirit her away to Ferrara, and marry her publicly.
But the plan catastrophically fails.
While she is waiting in her room, terrified and in pain, she hears heavy footsteps outside her door. She hears the unmistakable sound of armor and drawn steel.
It is her brother, Lorenzo, marching past with a squad of armed men.
The terror induces premature labor. She gives birth in the room, silently, terrified that a single cry will bring her brother through the door with a sword.
Which is just horrific to imagine.
So she wraps the newborn boy in the richest blankets she possesses. She instructs her maid to sneak out the back, run to the street, and hand the baby to the Duke's servant, who is supposed to be waiting at the designated door.
But the Duke's servant wasn't at the door.
No, Juan was walking past the door.
The maid whispered, "Fabio," the name of the Duke's servant, into the pitch dark.
Juan answered yes.
And the maid thrust the Duke's newborn son into the arms of a random Spanish student and locked the door.
Meanwhile, Cornelia, bleeding and out of her mind with fear, manages to climb out a window or slip out a side door.
She runs into the street alone, convinced her brother is actively hunting her down to execute her.
And that is when she crashes into Antonio.
I mean, Cervantes' narrative architecture here is astonishing.
It's like a puzzle fitting together perfectly.
He takes 4 completely disparate elements, a baby in an alley, an assassination attempt, a runaway noblewoman, and a fortune in diamonds, and crashes them all into a single college apartment within the span of a few hours.
The climax of this scene is just heartbreaking, really. While Cornelia is finishing her story, a sound drifts through the walls of the apartment.
The cry of a newborn.
Yes. Juan's maid hasn't yet taken the baby to the wet nurse. Cornelia freezes. She asks, with trembling breath, to see the child.
The maid brings the baby into the room, and Cornelia doesn't even need to see the child's face.
She recognizes the heavy, gold-embroidered blankets immediately.
The trauma, the fear, and the overwhelming relief collide as she takes the child. She realizes that through a miracle of timing and the bravery of these strangers, she is holding her own son.
I want to pause the narrative here, because we have to talk about Lorenzo Bentivoglio, Cornelia's brother.
Yes, we do.
To us, sitting here centuries later, Lorenzo sounds like a monster. He is patrolling his house with armed guards. Cornelia explicitly states to the students that she fled because she believed Lorenzo was coming to cleanse the family name with her blood.
Right.
That implies an honor killing, right?
Mm-hmm.
A brother executing his own sister over pregnancy. I mean, that is barbaric.
It is deeply disturbing to modern sensibilities, without a doubt. But we must analyze Lorenzo through the mechanics of 17th century Italian society.
Okay, lay it out for me.
Honor, what the Spanish called honora, was not an abstract internal feeling of good character like we think of it today.
It wasn't just about being a good person.
No, it was an external, highly fragile societal credit score. It dictated your family's ability to secure loans, arrange marriages, forge political alliances, and even maintain physical safety.
So honor is an actual currency, and Cornelia just defaulted on a massive loan.
Exactly. The purity and chastity of the noblewomen in a family were the absolute bedrock of that currency. If Cornelia had a child out of wedlock, the Bentivoglio family doesn't just face embarrassing gossip.
I'd lose everything.
They face total social and political bankruptcy. They become pariahs. In that brutal calculus, the loss of female chastity was a stain that often could only be erased by marriage or, horrifically, by blood.
Wow.
So Lorenzo's violent reaction is not portrayed by Cervantes as pure evil. It is portrayed as a tragic, almost inevitable enforcement of the rules of their world. Lorenzo is managing a crisis that threatens to destroy his entire lineage.
Which means Don Juan and Don Antonio are currently sitting on a diplomatic and social powder keg.
Oh, massive.
They are harboring a runaway noblewoman and the illegitimate child of the Duke of Ferrara, while her heavily armed brother is scouring the streets for vengeance.
And the match gets tossed into that powder keg the very next morning.
Yes. A heavy knock echoes through the apartment.
The pages open the door, and in walks Lorenzo Bentivoglio.
Cornelia is terrified out of her mind. She dives into the back room, literally biting her own fists to keep from screaming.
But Don Juan, who is remarkably calm, walks out to the main room to greet the man hunting the woman he is hiding in the next room.
The nerve of this guy.
Yeah.
But Lorenzo hasn't come to search the apartment, has he?
No. He has come specifically seeking an audience with Don Juan.
Why Juan?
This is where the reputation Cervantes established for the students really pays off. Lorenzo needs help. He cannot go to his own Italian friends or extended family to deal with this crisis because involving them would instantly spread the scandal.
Right, the secret would be out.
And that would cement the family's ruin. He needs an outsider. He needs someone who is famously discreet, highly skilled with a blade, and totally immune to the local political pressures of Bologna.
He needs the Spanish student who lacks typical arrogance but possesses the legendary capability.
Exactly. So Lorenzo tells Juan everything.
He says, the Duke of Ferrara has dishonored my sister and destroyed my family. I am writing to Ferrara today. I am going to demand he marry her, or I will challenge him to a duel to the death.
I need a second. Will you ride with me?
And Lorenzo leverages the very stereotype Cervantes has been playing with. He tells Juan that having a Spanish gentleman at his side is like having the armies of Xerxes protecting his back.
It is a massive compliment, but it places an impossible burden on Juan.
Right. I am amazed by Juan's response here. I mean, the logical move is to politely decline, claim he is busy with exams, and stay completely out of a blood feud involving a duke.
That would be the safe play.
Instead, Juan looks at the man who wants to murder the father of the baby sleeping in the next room, and he says, yes, absolutely, let's go.
But Juan agrees because he possesses information Lorenzo lacks.
The alley fight.
Right. Juan knows the Duke is not a dishonorable monster because he fought back-to-back with him in the alley. Juan recognizes that if he lets Lorenzo ride to Ferrara with a local hothead as a second, swords will be drawn immediately and someone will definitely die.
So he wants to be there to manage it.
By accepting the role of the second, Juan places himself directly between the two men. He intends to act as a diplomat, controlling the pace of the confrontation.
That is so smart. So Juan tells Antonio to guard the apartment with his life. Then, Juan and Lorenzo mount their horses and ride out of Bologna toward Ferrara.
The tension must have been incredibly thick.
But they don't even make it to the city gates of Ferrara. On the dusty road, they spot a large group of heavily armed horsemen riding toward them.
Juan squints into the sun and recognizes the crests. It's the Duke's entourage.
So Juan turns to Lorenzo and tells him to hang back, to let him approach the group first, to basically gauge the situation.
And as Juan rides forward, he does something highly theatrical.
He takes the protective cover off the hat he is wearing, exposing that massive, blinding diamond band to the sunlight.
The Duke is riding at the front of the group. He looks up, sees the explosive sparkle of his own 12,000 ducat hat band approaching on a solitary rider, and instantly recognizes the Spaniard who saved his life the night before.
The Duke leaps off his horse, runs down the road, and practically embraces Juan.
You have to imagine Lorenzo watching this from 100 yards back.
Right. He has hired this fearsome Spanish swordsman to help him intimidate the Duke, and instead he watches his second, hugging his sworn enemy.
He must have thought he was being completely betrayed.
Definitely. But Juan immediately pulls the Duke aside and cuts through all the pleasantries. He points back down the road. My lord, Lorenzo Bentivoglio is right over there. He says you dishonored his sister, ruined his house, and he is here to demand satisfaction or blood. What is your side of this story?
And the Duke's reaction is not anger or arrogance, but profound despair.
He confesses to Juan that he is utterly miserable. He states clearly that he never intended to abandon Cornelia, that he loves her deeply, and that before God, he considers her his true and legitimate wife. Okay, this is where I struggle with the Duke's character.
I thought you might.
If he considers her his wife, why the cloak and dagger routine? Why sneak around for 2 years? Why subject the woman he supposedly loves to a terrifying secret pregnancy? He is a duke. He has absolute power in his territory. Why not just knock on Lorenzo's door, ask for her hand publicly, and marry her?
It is a vital question, and it really requires us to understand the crushing weight of dynastic politics.
Explain that to me.
The Duke explains his paralysis. His mother, the Dowager Duchess, is currently on her deathbed, and her dying absolute demand is that her son marry the daughter of the Duke of Mantua.
Oh, so it's a political arrangement.
Yes. This proposed marriage isn't about romance. It is a massive geopolitical treaty disguised as a wedding. It would bind two powerful territories together.
So he's caught between being a good son and a good husband. But honestly, does the text let him off the hook too easily for putting Cornelia in mortal danger just to avoid defying his mother?
Well, to a 17th century audience, the Duke's dilemma would not be viewed as cowardice, but as a severe, tragic conflict of duties.
Really? Defying his mom was that big of a deal?
Defying a dying mother was considered a grave moral sin, but more importantly, rejecting the Mantua alliance to marry a lesser noblewoman like Cornelia could trigger political instability, economic retaliation, or even localized war.
Wow, okay, the stakes are huge.
The Duke's caution reflects the brutal reality that a sovereign's personal desires are almost always crushed by the needs of the state. He was waiting for his mother to pass away so he could marry Cornelia without sparking a geopolitical crisis.
A crisis he feels he has already caused, though. The Duke tells Juan that he rode to Bologna the night before to extract Cornelia and the baby. But when he arrived, the maid told him Cornelia had given birth, panicked, and vanished into the city, and that the baby had been handed to a stranger in the dark.
So the Duke is currently riding out to scour the countryside, completely heartbroken because he believes his wife and son are dead or lost forever.
This is the moment Juan realizes his gamble has paid off completely. The Duke doesn't want war. He wants his family.
So Juan smiles, waves Lorenzo over, and orchestrates the masterpiece of diplomacy he had planned.
Lorenzo rides up, hand tense on his sword hilt, expecting a fight. Instead, the Duke steps forward, opens his arms, and calls Lorenzo brother.
And Juan lays all the cards on the table. He explains the Duke's true, honorable intentions. He explains the chaotic misunderstanding in the alley.
He reveals that he, Juan, was the stranger who took the baby, and that the child is safe. And finally, he reveals that Antonio is currently guarding Cornelia back at their apartment.
The transformation in Lorenzo is instantaneous. The rage just evaporates, replaced by an overwhelming, collapsing relief.
The honor of the Bentivoglio family, which he thought was irrevocably destroyed, has been fully restored by a sovereign duke publicly acknowledging his sister as a legitimate wife.
The men are weeping, embracing in the dust of the road.
It is a miraculous resolution. Antonio even happens to be riding down the road to find them, unable to bear the suspense back at the apartment.
When he arrives, he joins the celebration. He cheekily asks the Duke for a massive reward for finding his wife, and they all laugh.
The group decides to ride back to the apartment in Bologna immediately to reunite the Duke with Cornelia and the baby.
It really feels like the triumphant end of the story. The diplomatic victory is total.
But Cervantes is not done with them yet.
Not at all. Because while the men have been forging peace on the road, Cornelia's own unchecked terror has created a brand new disaster back at the apartment.
We have to rewind the clock a few hours and look at what was happening in the apartment after Juan and Antonio left. Cornelia is sitting in the bedroom with her baby and her maid. And this maid is just a fountain of paranoia.
The maid has no reason to trust the Spanish students and every reason to fear Lorenzo, so she starts filling Cornelia's head with worst-case scenarios.
She argues that the entire diplomatic mission is a trap. Do you really think your brother went to Ferrara to talk? No, he probably lured the Spaniards away so he could leave his guards here. He's going to come back, break down that door, and kill us both.
And the maid points out that the only people guarding the apartment are 3 teenage pages who are more interested in playing dice than fighting off assassins.
The maid says they are completely defenseless and need to run immediately.
Now, you have to consider Cornelia's state of mind. She is running on 0 sleep. She has just given birth, she is separated from the man she loves, and she has spent the last 12 hours convinced she's going to be executed.
Her psychological state is incredibly fragile.
She completely succumbs to the maid's panic. The maid suggests they flee to a village priest she knows, a rural Piovano who lives a couple of miles outside the city walls.
So they hire a carriage, slip out the back door, and vanish into the countryside.
Which sets up what is arguably the most chaotic, brilliant scene in the entire text.
Oh, it's so good. Because the Duke, Lorenzo, Juan, and Antonio arrive back at the apartment. They are exhausted, but practically glowing with joy. They are ready for this beautiful, tearful reunion.
Antonio proudly marches up the stairs, ready to present Cornelia to the Duke.
But as he reaches the landing, one of his teenage pages nervously pulls him aside by the sleeve.
Yes, this is hilarious.
The page whispers to Antonio, "Hey, boss. So while you guys were gone, one of the other pages decided to take advantage of the empty apartment. He sneaked a woman of the night into his bedroom. And I think her name is also Cornelia.
You can almost see the blood completely drain from Antonio's face. The structural integrity of his perfect diplomatic victory just evaporated.
Antonio panics. He runs to the page's room, knocks frantically on the door, and whispers through the wood, "Cornelia, come out! Your brother and the Duke are here!"
And a voice from inside the room yells back, "You're making fun of me! I'm not so ugly that dukes and counts couldn't come looking for me!"
Antonio realizes with mounting horror that the woman answering is not the high-born noblewoman he left there. The real Cornelia has fled.
But the situation detonates before he can even try to explain.
The Duke and Lorenzo, tired of waiting on the stairs, hear the commotion and come up to the hallway. The Duke demands to see his wife.
Lorenzo, furious at the delay, strides forward and rips the sheet off the bed, expecting to find his sister.
Instead, he reveals a completely random woman.
Who, when interrogated, confirms that her name is, in fact, Cornelia.
It is an unbelievable sequence. Cervantes executes this massive tonal whiplash. We go from a high-stakes, life-or-death honor drama on the dusty road straight into a literal sitcom farce.
The wrong girl in the bedroom, who happens to have the exact same name.
It's like a Shakespearean comedy crash landing in the middle of a tense drama.
It is hilarious to the reader, but it serves a vital thematic purpose.
Oh, really? How so?
Cervantes is injecting the absurdity of real life into the rigid, deadly seriousness of aristocratic honor codes. He is showing that no matter how much you plan, no matter how much diplomacy you employ, human fallibility, paranoia, and sheer coincidence can upend everything.
That makes perfect sense. For the characters in the room, though, it is devastating.
The Duke's joy turns instantly into humiliated rage. He believes the entire morning was an elaborate, cruel prank played by the Spanish students to mock him.
He storms out of the apartment, refusing to speak to anyone. Lorenzo follows him, equally confused and furious.
Juan and Antonio are left standing in the wreckage of their apartment, deeply humiliated.
They kick the page and the woman out onto the street and frantically try to figure out what to do next.
But they realize they cannot involve the authorities or start asking questions around the taverns. If they publicly launch a search for Cornelia Bentivoglio, the gossip will explode, Lorenzo will be forced back into a corner, and the blood logic of the honor code will demand vengeance again.
So they have to keep the search entirely secret.
Meanwhile, the Duke rides away from Bologna. He is plunged back into despair. He cannot bear the thought of returning to his grand palace in Ferrara without his family.
So he decides to detour and seek solace with a close, trusted friend who lives in a quiet village just outside the city.
The village priest.
Let me guess. It is the exact same rural Piovana that Cornelia and the maid fled to.
It is indeed.
The coincidences in this novella are piled high.
They are, but they work because they emphasize how small and interconnected the aristocratic world of 17th century Italy truly was.
So the Duke arrives at the priest's house, looking absolutely shattered. He sits down, expecting a quiet afternoon of mourning.
But the priest, noticing the Duke's profound sadness and wanting to lift his spirits, says, "My lord, I have something here that will bring you joy."
Now we must understand what happened before the Duke walked in. Cornelia had arrived at the priest's house hours earlier.
Recognizing the priest's authority and trusting his vow of confidence, she confessed everything to him.
The priest, realizing the magnitude of the political situation, told Cornelia to remain hidden, but instructed her to dress her baby in every piece of jewelry the Duke had ever given her.
So when the Duke sits down, the priest walks out of the back room holding the newborn child.
The Duke looks at the baby. He recognizes the heavy gold-embroidered blankets. But more importantly, he sees the jewelry resting on the child's chest. He sees a magnificent diamond cross, and beside it, he sees an Agnus Dei.
Yes.
We need to pause here because earlier I just thought of this as a fancy necklace, but it carries a lot more weight than that, doesn't it?
Much more. An Agnus Dei, which translates to Lamb of God, was not merely a piece of jewelry. It was a highly specific, sacred religious artifact.
What was it made of?
It was a disc of wax, often salvaged from the paschal candle of the Pope himself, stamped with the image of a lamb and encased in solid gold or crystal.
So it's basically a holy relic.
Exactly. These were incredibly rare, blessed by the Pope, and usually possessed only by high nobility or royalty. It wasn't just wealth, it was proof of divine favor and absolute lineage.
When the Duke sees the Agnus Dei on the baby, he isn't just recognizing a necklace, he's recognizing the undisputed heir to his dynasty.
He stares at the baby's face and sees his own reflection staring back. He asks the priest, with his voice trembling, whose child this is.
The priest replies, "I don't know, my lord. But if the mother is as beautiful as the woman who brought him here, she must be the most beautiful woman in all of Italy.
And at that cue, Cornelia steps out of the shadows of the doorway.
The shock of seeing her, alive and safe, is so violently profound that the text says the Duke literally drops the baby back into the priest's arms and runs out of the room.
Which is the worst possible reaction.
Seriously. Cornelia immediately assumes he hates her. She bursts into tears, crying out, "He thinks I'm ugly. He's disgusted by me. He has abandoned me."
But the Duke didn't run away in horror. He ran out to the courtyard to scream at his servants.
He orders his fastest rider to gallop back to Bologna instantly and drag Lorenzo, Juan, and Antonio to the village. He wants every single person who suffered through this ordeal present for the reunion.
He returns to the room, wraps Cornelia in his arms, and they finally have their tearful embrace. Cervantes notes that they spent the subsequent hours in honest and amorous silence, simply holding their child and absorbing the reality that the nightmare was over.
But the Duke, despite the profound relief, cannot resist one final elaborate prank.
He really can't help himself.
When Lorenzo, Juan, and Antonio finally arrive at the priest's house, exhausted, stressed out of their minds, and covered in road dust, the Duke greets them in the main hall, looking incredibly somber.
He sits Lorenzo down. He adopts an expression of deep, tragic regret. He says, "Lorenzo, I know I promised you on the road that I would marry your sister, and I meant it, but I must confess a prior sin.
Oh boy.
Before I ever met Cornelia, I came to this village and I gave my sworn word of marriage to a local peasant girl. And as a sovereign and a gentleman, my honor dictates that I must keep my first promise. I cannot marry your sister. I hope you understand."
The cruelty of this joke is staggering. Lorenzo's face must have gone through 1,000 colors. He's been dragged back and forth, his family's honor restored and destroyed 3 times in 24 hours.
He is about to explode into violence. Juan actually leans over and whispers to Lorenzo, "By Santiago of Galicia, I will not let him leave this room alive."
Juan and Antonio are literally gripping their sword hilts. They are ready to murder the Duke of Ferrara in a priest's living room over the insult.
The aristocratic sense of humor in this era could be incredibly sharp and often bordered on psychological torture. But the Duke pushes it right to the absolute edge before snapping the tension.
He stands up and says, "Let me introduce you to the peasant girl." He opens the door, and in walks Cornelia.
She is radiant, covered in the Duke's jewels and holding their son.
The relief in that room must have been dense enough to cut with a sword. Lorenzo falls to his knees at the Duke's feet, weeping.
Juan and Antonio let go of their swords, bursting into laughter, declaring it the greatest, most terrifying joke in the world.
And the village priest wastes no time. He performs the marriage ceremony right there on the spot, binding the Duke and Cornelia together legally and spiritually.
Cervantes ties up the remaining historical loose ends with remarkable neatness here.
Yeah, how does it all wrap up?
Well, shortly after this secret wedding, the Duke's mother, the Dowager Duchess who demanded the Mantua alliance, conveniently passes away.
Oh, very convenient.
Indeed. Her death removes the political blockade, allowing the Duke to make his marriage public. Cornelia enters Ferrara not as a hidden lover, but as the new, celebrated Duchess.
And what happens to our Spanish heroes? The Duke is so grateful he offers to marry Juan and Antonio to 2 of his own wealthy cousins, effectively offering them permanent residency in the highest echelons of Italian nobility.
But they decline. They play their role as the perfectly polite, respectful outsiders to the very end. They simply cite that Basque gentlemen usually prefer to marry in their homeland, so they return to Spain.
But they don't return empty-handed. They go back to Spain, eventually marry wealthy women of their own, and the Duke insists they keep the 12,000 ducat diamond hat band, the diamond cross, and the Agnus Dei.
They basically retire as incredibly wealthy, legendary heroes without ever having to step foot on a muddy battlefield in Flanders.
It is a profoundly joyful ending, but it really demands that we look back at the mechanics of the story.
Absolutely. Cervantes has totally dismantled the expectation of the era. These 2 young men set out to achieve greatness through violence, through the exercise of arms.
But they achieve ultimate success, wealth, and legend through patience, diplomacy, and morality.
They succeeded because Juan didn't leave a baby to freeze in an alley. They succeeded because Antonio gave sanctuary to a terrified refugee without interrogating her.
They kept cool heads when the honor code demanded blood.
The novella is really a testament to human decency overriding systemic violence. Cervantes is arguing that the structures we build to protect ourselves, the rigid honor codes, the dynastic marriages, the national stereotypes, often become the very cages that trap us.
And it is only individual moral courage that breaks those cages open.
Precisely.
Which brings us to the timelessness of this entire narrative. Yes, we are talking about a 1612 story featuring dukes, diamond-plated armor, and 12,000 ducat hats.
The costumes and the props have changed.
But the psychology driving these characters is instantly recognizable today, judging people by their nationality or social class. The paralyzing fear of failing to meet your family's expectations.
The way a simple miscommunication, like a paranoid maid or a misplaced hat, can just spiral into an absolute disaster.
Human nature hasn't evolved. It simply operates through different technologies and social frameworks. The desperation Cornelia felt, the crushing weight of duty the Duke felt, and the violent protective instinct Lorenzo felt are all emotions we navigate today.
Very true.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Throughout this story, Lorenzo was fully prepared to execute his own sister, and Juan was fully prepared to murder a sovereign duke, all because the invisible societal credit score known as honor demanded it.
Today, we look back at that 17th century blood logic, and we find it barbaric, almost incomprehensible. But what is our modern equivalent? What abstract social concepts do we value today that drive us to publicly destroy reputations, sever relationships, or ruin lives? What invisible codes are we so fiercely enforcing right now that people looking back at us 400 years from now will find utterly terrifyingly absurd? Keep that in mind the next time you find yourself standing in the dark, wondering what to do with the heavy burden you've just been handed.